Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the In the Paint Show presented by Ballislife. Umana with Ronnie Flores here. Another episode, 122. We appreciate everybody listening in, tuning in on your favorite, app, iTunes, Spotify, or even that YouTube version. We appreciate you guys watching it. So we're back at it again. It's been a crazy week of ball. I mean, feel like you have a hangover. Monty, have you had or seen a weekend? First NCAA weekend like the one we had?
No, it's been a minute. I mean, just all the upsets. I mean, it's March Madness, Baylor losing. You got Michigan in Sweet 16. You got St. Peter's in the Sweet 16. Miami. Man, it's just been wild. And I love it. I love it. Like we talked about it last week. We expected that anybody can win any game. So we were right on that. Our brackets may not be right, but
our brackets may be a little up, but we were right on a lot of things. The Big Ten not really showing well,
right?
Again, as we expected. Me and you, Chelsea, talked about that, and then Michigan is kind of holding it down for them the last 2 years. They're the team that's been doing well. We're going to get into that. We want to talk about GEICO's Nationals, and we want to talk about the State Championships Invitational. Those two events, which we've talked about a lot recently. The fields are set. We wanted to break it down. We're going to have some special guests, Jordan Divens of MaxPreps and Justin Young of Hoop Scene, to talk a little bit about, just the spring coming up, those events. So, we'll talk a little bit about high school before our guests come on. Let's start with high schools. We kind of probe the paint. We won't get hard into the paint into the tournament until a little later. It was a big week in high school basketball. Obviously, we're winding down. There's only about 3-4 states still going on.
Right.
We got Minnesota, Michigan, and Pennsylvania going to wrap up this week, and then all that will be left will be, GEICO, the Final Four weekend, and the new event the weekend after. So again, Jordan of MaxPreps is going to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, I do the Fab 50. He does the MaxPreps rankings, and those are the ones that USA Today's was around, and they kind of stopped their coverage. And then they kind of revamped it. I'm not sure what they're doing anymore, but they stopped it right before the pandemic kicked off, 2019. And, me and Jordan have been plugging away. And obviously I've been around. I'm a little bit older than him, but, he does a good job. So we want to get his take. He knows the teams pretty well.
For sure.
But, what did you make? There's a big, at the top, there was two big state champions, two top-ranked teams that lost. Number 11, Centerville, Ohio, with Gabe Cupps, was undefeated. Had a 45-game winning streak. They lost to Pickering Central, known as Pick Central, in the Ohio D1 final. They went down. It was a pretty good game, but Pick Central did a good job. They were considered the number 2 team in the Final Four field. And then out of New Jersey, Roselle Catholic, which has been very good. They've won 4 TOCs, Tournament of Champions in New Jersey, 213, 215, 218, and now 222. They took down Camden in overtime. DJ Wagner, the great junior from Camden, he had a chance to give him a lead with like 4 seconds to go.
Yeah.
And then he had, they made their free throws. They were up 3, and then he shot a heave and it was off. But Roselle did a good job. What did you make of those two results there? And kind of, little small upsets, not huge, but Centerville going down was big news.
Yeah, Centerville going down was kind of caught me off guard. Pickerton did a good job just defending, Gabe Cupps making them work. I saw just kind of watching some of the stuff that I saw.
Yeah.
Like you said, Centerville was on a 45-game win streak. They kind of, even though Pick was a number 2 seed, it just, you thought they're going to keep rolling. They're going to keep rolling.
Yeah.
Centerville was, but good. It's just tough. There's a lot of pressure when you win 45 games, you're undefeated, and you go to a state title game. There's a lot of pressure there. So, so it's just one of those things. It was tough. Camden losing was kind of showing how the season was. Like, they had a good season, but, I think originally they were ranked the top 10 team in your Fab 50, correct?
They were pretty high. They might have been 5-4. I got to look it up where they were in the preseason. I don't remember it exactly by heart, but they've been 5, 7, 10, 8 the whole year. And
right.
It's been one of those seasons where They won some games, they lost. I think the only game that I saw that they lost, I was like, okay, man, was obviously the game that a lot of people saw.
Right.
The one against Calvary, which is still playing, and obviously we're playing the state championship invitational. But when Calvary went down and beat them at that big event, it's like, okay, yeah, you know, they bounced back pretty good, as we talked about that weekend. But
yeah, for sure.
You know,
they beat Sierra Canyon.
They beat Sierra Canyon, and they went 1-2 that weekend, lost to Montverde, which wasn't a big surprise. But
right.
Yeah, you know, Roselle's been good. You know, Simon Wiltshire going to North Carolina had a big game. Mm-hmm. You know, they have a good team, and they're very good. You know, overall, they've just been very good. Coach Dave Boff does a good job there. And very interesting, that's the last Tournament of Champions title this ever. It started in 1989, and it's now, that was the last one. I guess they made it to where they thought it didn't really benefit a lot of other student athletes, like from the other schools, that was only beneficial to a small amount. So they stopped it. I guess it was a vote they had, and they stopped it, you know. So we're gonna have Jordan jump on in a moment, but yeah, that's very surprising. I'd always hoped they continued it. It created great memories for the event, and you know, having that event was good. You know, I always promote like having a Tournament of Champions or some kind of open division. You know, some states definitely need it. I mean, Florida needs it badly. Georgia needs it. Pennsylvania's still going. They got like 7 divisions. You know, so it's just very interesting that they stopped it. But I get they're trying to get the week back for all the teams at the beginning, instead of just having the state champions meeting. It only affects like 6 or 8 teams. So
I like the concept. I really do.
Yeah,
and I think even in Texas, they did that one year. I think you just get so much like support, and you get some really, really high level games. I understand you don't want to keep extending the weeks, but I mean, you're going to see some really good basketball. And like, you got that's the best team in the state, like, no doubt about it.
Correct. There's no doubt about it. It's one on the court. So let's bring in Jordan now. I think he's here on the line. Jordan, can you hear us? Are you there?
Yeah. How's it going, man?
How you doing, Jordan? I appreciate you jumping on the In the Paint show. Appreciate you getting your input. You always have good input. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, of course, man. Anytime you want to hop on and talk some hoops, I'm here.
Yeah, definitely. Jordan, wanted to get your highline take. You know, first off, we have, you know, the state championships wrapping up in Pennsylvania, where you are. A few less states, but after that, it's just GEICO and you know, the state champions invitational, the new event. So just kind of wanted to get, do you think it was a natural progression to split GEICO from the traditional state champs?
I do think it was a natural progression. You know, obviously at MaxPreps this year, we actually split our rankings before the season. So naturally we see, sorry, did I cut off there for a second?
You guys hear me? Go ahead.
All right, sorry about that. All right, so yeah, no, I mean, to me, it's a natural progression. At MaxPreps for the preseason rankings, we actually split them between independents and teams that compete for a state title. So that's really the natural progression that we're seeing, is just there's more and more of a divide in the talent for these top independent programs, these basketball academies per se. And the teams that compete for a state title are just the gap is furthering more and more.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you just think it was a good natural progression because of the talent level, mostly, and just the gap that's growing between the two.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's just the talent level of teams that compete for a state title and teams that are on the independent circuit are just, you know, it's becoming more and more of a talent gap there.
Gotcha. Jordan, what did you make of the field, you know, the 14 field, and the concept of the event, and when the event's happening, and just the event itself that's going to take place the 7th through the 9th of April?
I think it's a strong field to start off the event. Obviously, next year they're going to expand it to 8 teams, and hopefully it's going to be more inclusive in the future. Hopefully more state associations will come on board, and it'll be more of a national championship feel, which is what I feel like we're getting from GEICO this year, is kind of a national championship feel on from the independents. But the more this event establishes itself, obviously it's in the first year. It's an extension of GEICO, but this is the first year of this event. I think the more we see it grow, the more we're going to see it become more of a national championship feel. Whereas this year, obviously Calvary Christian comes in as a heavy favorite.
Sure.
But I mean, the other teams in the field are no slouches. I mean, these are 4 good teams, and I think it's going to be high level competition.
What, Jordan, just, you know, how much will the state championships, obviously this year with the 4 teams in it's just his first year, but like going forward, you know, they want to add teams. How much will it weigh into like your final rankings?
Well, it's a tough question for this season because, like I said, Calvary's such a heavy favorite that if they win, it probably won't impact their ranking much because we have Duncanville and Centennial at 1 and 2 pretty locked in. However, at the bottom of the rankings, you know, a Sidwell Friends, if they can win their first round, I mean, if they could upset Calvary and they could win the whole thing, they could move into the top 10. So, I mean, it could really have a big impact on the other 3 teams. You know, Auburn, Norcross, and Sidwell could all see major rises in the rankings if they're able to win. For Calvary, it's kind of one of those events where these are some impressive wins to build onto the resume, tack on the resume, but it's not going to move them up in our rankings this year. Whereas in future years, hopefully, when it's more of a national championship feel, it'll kind of shape our top 10.
Yeah, makes sense. Jordan, are you a little bit surprised Liberty, Nevada didn't make it? They obviously beat Gorman in the final game. They obviously lost to Gorman 3 other times, but, you know, beating a team that would have came in right there with Calvary, maybe as the favorite, or even, you know, that could have been a monster championship game. Are you a little surprised that Liberty didn't get a nod?
I'm a little bit surprised, but I can't say I'm shocked. The thing about Liberty is they had a great season. They have some good wins over Oak Cliff, who won in Texas, 4A. They have they played some you know, a good schedule and everything.
Sure.
But my thing with Liberty is Georgia 7A is so hard to win. I mean, it's one of the toughest states to win, and I think that's where the event wanted to reward the Georgia champion. So, like, am I surprised? I'm moderately surprised Liberty didn't make it, but I can't say I'm shocked. I mean, I think there's a good debate for Norcross above them because of, like I said, it's a grind to win that. Yes, they beat Bishop Gorman, but they also lost to Bishop Gorman the previous 3 times. So I think that has something to do with it, too. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I mean, I just feel like avenging that win was awesome in the state championship game, but Georgia is a grind every round. It's not just the state championship in Nevada. You know, it's a grind. I mean, that's what I think of it. And so, yeah, moderately surprised, but not a shock.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Were there any teams just in your rankings from the public school standpoint, or the teams that compete for a state championship, that kind of surprised you, or just, you know, I wouldn't say overachieved, but just you didn't think would be in your top 50 this year?
Well, okay, there's a few teams. I mean, Glenbard West, to be honest with you, they were so impressive all season. I mean, they just spanked everyone they played. I mean, to me, even the Sierra Canyon game was surprising. It was a surprising result to me because if you watch Sierra Canyon play all season, as I know, you know, it's in Ronnie's backyard. So to me, that was their best game of the season. They didn't play that well in any other game all season. I mean, maybe I just missed the games that they played, but I thought that they really, even Amari Bailey on the biggest stage, he played at the highest level, and I thought that was the difference. Yeah. Whereas I think if they played 10 times, I think Glenbard West wins that game 7 or 8 times. I just think the stage, I just don't think that they were prepared for that level of a stage on the high school scene where Sierra Canyon's used to playing in that atmosphere. So I think they're the team that really stood out. Another team that surprised me was Weddington, who went undefeated this year. I actually saw them live this year, and when I saw them live, I wouldn't say they were like super off the charts impressive from an eye test standpoint. Sure. But as they progressed late in the postseason, they beat some really good teams, and they really showed that they're one of the better teams in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, for them to finish 31-0 in a good state against pretty good competition. That was definitely very impressive. Let's talk a little bit about GEICO before we let you go, Jordan. This year, like you said, it's balanced. The teams are good. The teams are really talented. Like you said, probably more talented than most of the public or state champions that are associated with the NFHS. What do you make of the field? And is there a prohibitive favorite? You just think it's balanced? Is it as wide open as a field as you've ever seen?
Sorry, I missed the last thing you said.
Yeah, is it as wide open?
The last
field is it as wide open as you've ever seen it? Yeah, is GEICO National wide open?
Yes, 100%. That question is not even up for debate. It's as wide open as I've ever seen it. And when I talk to people, I say I think there's 5 to 6 teams that have a legitimate chance at winning it this year. And usually it's 1 or 2 teams. This year it's 5 or 6. I mean, if you look down the field, you have Sunrise is obviously a slight favorite. But I mean, they're in by no means a heavy favorite. You got IMG, who's just loaded. Montverde. AZ Compass has an outside shot. I mean, I know they haven't looked the best in games against top competition, but they really have the talent. They could put it together. And Link Academy only has 1 loss. I really think Link Academy is a team to watch in this event.
Wow. Yeah, that opening 4-5 Link against Oak Hill. If they get by that game, it's going to be their first game in the event. They can probably settle down and maybe even win the semifinal game, like you said. And then if you get to the final, who knows what, it's a one-shot game. Who knows what could happen, so.
Yeah, and I did want to mention, I forgot to mention, man, Oak Hill.
Yeah.
And Steve Smith last year, man, they're on a roll. I think they have a serious shot. I mean, like you said, if they can, whoever wins that Link Oak Hill game has a serious shot. And I really mean that. I mean, I think that's going to be probably the best first round matchup. But I mean, there's no bad first round matchup.
No, not at all. Yeah, I agree with you there. Link Oak Hill's a pick'em game, and if they can get on a roll, it's very interesting. Like you said, they have a lot of incentive because it's Steve Smith's last year, but they looked at times not good against AZ Compass, and then they just picked it up in the last month, over the course of the month of the season. So we're with you there. So we'll see what shakes out, and we're looking forward, to both events. I know you're looking forward to them too. It gives you another week of rankings you have to do, but at least it's better than not doing, I guess, having the work to do, Jordan. So we appreciate your time.
Appreciate you, Jordan.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Okay, sure. Appreciate it. So, Ronnie, I think he's with us on that as far as like GEICO just, I think Sunrise does deserve the benefit of the doubt. Maybe we're not giving as much credit as they deserve.
Right. We're giving them like the NCAA 1 seed credit. Like you're a 1 seed, but you may be upset early.
Yeah, they're not like they're a 1 seed, but you're right. They're not the dominant 1 seed that everybody expects to just roll. But again, they split with Montverde, so that's hey, they deserve it. They beat Link in a big game that me and you saw. So let's just go over that real quick so our fans can know what the matchups are. It's number 1 Sunrise versus Prolific Prep. That's the 1 versus the 8. Mm-hmm. The game that we just talked about with Jordan. Link number 4 versus number 8 in the Fab 50 and 5 seed Oak Hill Academy. Again, they seeded Oak Hill a little higher. Again, I knocked Oak Hill for some of their losses. They lost Greensboro Day. They split with La Lumiere. La Lumiere won the second one. Again, that game I saw live against AZ Compass Prep. They didn't look good at all, but they've really improved since then. And hopefully we'll have Steve Smith, Oak Hill coach, on the show before GEICO. And, so that's the 4-5. But I do have Oak Hill a little lower in the rankings than their seeding. Again, I'm taking the whole season into account. And then the other side of the bracket is Montverde's the number 3, and they're also 3rd seed, and they play Arizona Prep. So that's the 3-6. And then the 2-7 is IMG and La Lumiere. Now, again, I have IMG number 6, but that's because they have the 2 losses to Sunrise, the split, whereas Sunrise has a split with Montverde, and they have a split with Oak Hill. Again, so Oak Hill's really good at times. They got a split with IMG. So, again, if you look at that, that's pretty wide open. So IMG takes on La Lumiere, who also has a split with Oak Hill. So, in my rankings, I have Sunrise 1, Duncanville still at number 2, Montverde 3. Again, they've lost to IMG 2 times, but they split with with Sunrise. Link is 4 with the loss to Sunrise. Centennial, which is done with their season. California 33-1. They're 5. IMG comes in at 6. La Lumiere 7 and Oak Hill 8. And then Calvary is 9. As we know, Calvary's the favorite at the
state champion.
At the state champions. So again, Jordan's right. Calvary really, in essence, has nowhere to go.
Right. They can't go up. They can only really go stay the same or go down.
They can maybe jump up a spot of like La Lumiere or IMG, doesn't do too well or something like that. But if you take the overall wins and losses, they're not going to move too much. So
right.
Yeah, you would, that's what I say. That's why I'm just like, is it interesting that Liberty didn't get in? I would think.
I would thought they were going to get in.
Yeah, if you think, and I agree with him on Georgia. Georgia's harder to win than Nevada, but that's on tradition and reputation. This year, I saw some of the teams that were going to advance in the 7A, and they're not as good as Calvary, and they're not as good as Gorman. So. Liberty lost those 3 games. Maybe that's a big factor. And I did see some of those teams. So Norcross right now, I only have 49. So let's go over that bracket real quick. It's a smaller bracket.
Yeah.
And, that bracket, let me pull it up here. You got Calvary at number 9 versus Sidwell Friends. To me, that's a huge matchup, and that's 1 versus 14 for me. Mm-hmm. So the other matchup is 2 lower ranked teams. Auburn and Norcross, and I have Auburn a little higher. I moved them up to 32. They have a split with Garfield and State, and they lost to Mount Spokane. And Norcross, Norcross lost to Brentwood Academy in Tennessee. They only beat Berkmar 1 of 4. They split with Newton, Westlake, so they're 26-6. They weren't super dominant, but they did win that state title. So that's both those games are on ESPNU on April 7th. Starting at 4:00 Eastern, just to let you know, a Final Four weekend. Let me go over the time so people know about those to watch GEICO. And I wanted just to give people an idea that when GEICO is. The first round games are March 31st, and those are on ESPNU as well, starting at 12 p.m. Eastern. So it's pretty much all day between 12 and 8 p.m. So that should be very interesting. Ani, you have any predictions? What do you? Let's start with state championship invitation. What do you think there? You think Calvary gets it done, or you think Sidwell Friends can show what they're made of, or do the other 2 teams have a chance?
I like to go with the upset, so I'm gonna go with Sidwell with the upset, and they're gonna win it all.
Wow. Yeah. No, I take the winner of Sidwell versus Calvary's going to win it
for sure.
Yeah, they're going to win it. Auburn and Norcross going to have to step up. I think Norcross can step up. He's right. Jordan is right. I think Norcross can step up.
But I would love Liberty in there. I think if Liberty was in there, it would make it very interesting. I just think, let's say, and no offense, Norcross, they won a state title. They're really good. But you put Liberty right there in that game, and let's say it's a Calvary Liberty championship matchup. Sidwell and Liberty, that's a
that's a little bigger matchup. Yeah, I think this puts more pressure on Calvary. They can't really lose.
Right.
There's a team that's played the national schedule. They beat some good teams, like you mentioned, Camden and some others. They're kind of were expecting to get into a GEICO, or if they didn't get into GEICO, if they split the event, they were kind of expecting to get into this new event. So. Sure. Yeah, they're the top seed. They're the top dog, but they got a lot of pressure, just like some of these NCAA top seeds. Now let's jump over to GEICO. I guess let's talk about each matchup a little bit. I think Sunrise will get by their first round matchup. Then we got Link Oak Hill. What do you think about Link and Oak Hill?
Man, it's gonna be a tough one. I just think Oak Hill is gonna really come to play. Obviously, we know we talked about the Steve Smiths last season. I just think they're gonna come to play. Even though they're a very up and down team, I think we're going to see the good Oak Hill team. And Link, they're just so big inside. They got a big size advantage. They really defend. I'm gonna go with Link. It's gonna be a 1 to 2 possession game there. Obviously, Oak Hill has the advantage of being there before. We did see that with Link and Sunrise, where they kind of crumbled a little bit in the second half. But I think they've learned from it. I give Link the edge. I think it's gonna be a 1-2 possession game.
Yeah, and then that makes sense. And then you got MVA Montverde and Arizona Compass Prep. I do think they kind of developed a little rivalry. They didn't really like each other last year at all. Right. With what happened there, with Duron Holmes leaving and he going to, that, and then Ty hit a lot of big shots. The Arizona Compass was really good last year. They're not quite as good this year, but they've played good and at times very good. They've looked very good, and other times against the top teams they kind of look okay. If there's going to be an upset, I think it's going to be that one. I think AZ could move on, but I do think Montverde, I give them a slight edge and they'll win. But if that's my upset special, watch for AZ Compass to really have a good game. And then IMG La Lumiere, I think IMG will advance. They had a great game during this regular season, and we saw that game. Keontae George went pretty nuts, but I think IMG will advance. And then
I thought La Lu played like probably one of the best games of their season against IMG. It's just I don't know if they can duplicate that. They're a really good team. I just don't know if they can duplicate that.
Yeah. I'll take IMG to advance, and then you got Sunrise versus Link. That again, that's a rematch of a game already played, and then you got let's say Montverde versus IMG, which is always a war. Those teams know each other so well, they can go back and forth. IMG has beat them. As I mentioned, IMG has beat them, I believe, twice. Yeah, IMG's beat them twice. So, anything can happen here. We'll get into it a little bit more about what, we'll predict our winner next week. We'll try to get Steve Smith on the line. As like you said, they have a lot of incentive for the last year of their him being their coach, and after 37 years, and him kind of being one of the forerunners of National Academy basketball. And then it's progressed so much. We want to talk to him a little bit about that. But this event is now taking on, it's been around 12, 13 years, 13 going on 14 actually, but it's continues to get better in terms of the matchups. There was, as our guest Rashid Ghazi said a few weeks ago, some of those early round matchups in the early years weren't very good. Right. It's a lot better. Or any one of those four, because we're just picking them kind of like this NCAA tournament. These are pretty good.
Like we should have like a warning label that just says, "Hey, look, anybody can win. Our predictions could be completely off."
I don't think. Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's for GEICO. I think for state champions invitational, like Calvary's not going to want to lose. I know we keep going back to that.
I'll pull up with the upset.
Yeah, Sidwell Friends is got really nothing to lose. It's like the other three teams have nothing to lose. You know what I mean? Right. And Calvary's kind of wants to show they're one of the best teams in the country. And they have proved they're one of the best teams in the country, and they're playing pretty well. So we'll see how that layoff also affects these teams. I think the academy teams are a little bit more used to it. They kind of been there before, having a break. It's almost like 2 seasons. So we'll see with the states champions how that layoff affects them. How much were they practicing? How many weeks were they practicing going in? So we'll see how that plays out. But let's jump over to our main in the paint topic, which is obviously the NCAA tournament. Again, they're kind of like we're in the Sweet 16. So much happened. Like you said, Ani, I think we were pretty good with some of the things we mentioned. It's the big thing we talked about, and let's just first talk about the thing that's on everybody's mind is the officiating. It got a lot of attention, especially in that UNC Baylor and Arizona TCU game, Ani. Is this a recurring problem that can be fixed, or is it just part of the game? And the team's kind of it's college officiating, could be bad. Do you think there's something that needs to be fixed there, or is that that's just part of the game?
Yeah, I think it's just part of the game. That UNC Baylor game, It wasn't good.
Yeah.
Manic obviously getting ejected. There were some very questionable calls. In that situation, I think the easy solution is getting 3 new refs on that situation. But I think some of the other games like Arizona, TCU, there were some questionable calls, but it was a physical matchup. I mean, I thought that was just, what you're seeing is obviously like college referees, but you're also letting them see them play a little bit as far as just like, it's like playoff basketball, in the NBA playoffs, they let more stuff go. I thought I was seeing that sometimes it's not as consistent as you would like, but I thought the TCU, even though, we're down here, we're rooting for TCU. So, but, I thought, at the end, I know they wanted to foul on Mike, when he came off that ball screen, but I think you just let that go. I think you let that go with like 4 seconds left. I don't think you called that. But I just think it's just part of the game. I thought the Baylor UNC game, it wasn't good. And
no, that was bad itself. That was a lot worse than TCU Arizona.
For sure. And if Baylor would have won, it would have been zoomed in even further. Like it would look even worse. Yeah. But UNC won. But I just think those referees don't need to officiate another call it, March Madness.
This season, I agree with you. Again, I don't think there's a big fix that needs to transpire. I mean, they're the best refs that are available. I'm assuming they're better than refs that are not reffing the tournament. Right. Refs, right? I mean,
don't get me started with high school refs.
They're supposed to be better than high school refs. Like it's just like I said, I was telling somebody I think on social media. Like there's a reason why a lot of college March Madness players don't play in the NBA. Like you watch the games. If you're a big NBA fan, you're like, hey, some of these games are not very good. Yes, it's college. Like,
right.
Like, yes, they're not as good. I just think the pageantry, the unpredictability, the emotion, the raw emotion is way better than the average NBA game. But that's why it's the first weekend. I was here in Vegas. It was, it was a buzz around town about every game. But the first weekend is very great because of the amount of games, there's just so many games going on. There's a lot of good ones. And you're right. There's no notes to be big fix. I just think we have instant replay and people are tuned in. There's so much attention. Everybody's reacting in real time on Twitter. So that's what we get. It's such a great social media. I just think Twitter and or social media is that good. It's not the refs are that bad. The refs have always been. It's just that we can react to it so fast. I will say this. It was kind of interesting. Miami versus USC. Yeah. And also, I'll go back to TCU and Arizona. Is in Miami versus USC, there was a big call on the sidelines that could have affected the game, and they didn't show the replay. But they showed Coach K coming into the building and like he was with his wife.
Really?
Like, whoa, guys, show the replay. Like, yeah, I get it. Coach K is going to go to the locker room and shake hands and hang out with people, but like, show the replay. That's what I noticed. I mean, you got $1 million production, and then obviously Dalen Terry gets the turnover. He sprints to the basket. The shot doesn't count. It's like he's trying to put it in. He doesn't want to miss it, but he wants to dunk it because that's an easy shot. But then the first thing I thought is show the replay. Show the replay. Right. Was it a foul? Was it did he flop a little bit? We only saw it later until after we knew that
that's a good point.
The basket didn't count, and they could have went to that replay. It was obviously no, the shot didn't count, so they had many of time to show it. They didn't show it, so then you had to go to Twitter or whatever to go watch the replay, and then people have a million opinions. But I want to hear a professional opinion on my TV, right? Like, right. So that's one thing I kind of notice about that. They don't want to show certain things, and I couldn't believe that Baylor. Some of the calls, I said, okay, that's going to be another charge. I already called it on a few. I called him. I said, charge coming up right here. It's going the other way. Baylor ball. It was obvious. Like, but were you surprised that North Carolina didn't see that a little further? That they were trying to get Baycoat out of the game. Like they were trying to bait him into getting into a scrum or like getting to a couple more fouls or even kicked out because that's the way they figured they were going to get back in the game to just, kind of muck it up, slow it down. I mean, if North Carolina loses Baco to some, tangling the legs, that favors Baylor big time.
Right. Because Baco was killing. He's been killing this tournament. Yeah, I seen Baylor kind of do that during the season. When they're down. Obviously, haven't seen them down 25. But they get it. They make it more. They get real physical. They get more grittier. They like to muddy the water some. So I mean, UNC, I think a little surprised I didn't see that coming because Baylor has kind of showed that this season. But and then for them to come back 25, I mean, they try to get in their head at that point, especially Baylor. They were trying to get him out the game because they really didn't have an answer for him.
No, they didn't have an answer for him on the block. No.
Yeah, and so it didn't surprise me. I knew they were going to pick up the intensity, and and they got to overtime. And when it got to overtime, I'm like, oh man, shit, Baylor gonna win this.
Yeah. North Carolina kind of won the game twice.
Right, real talk. And then you see Scott Drew, and when it go to overtime, he put his hand over his face like that.
Yeah,
he didn't want to see the game. He was about done with it.
Oh man, that's very interesting. But I think we have our next guest, Justin Young of Hoop Scene. He want to talk a little bit about the tournament, talk a little bit about recruiting and the spring coming up, which is coming up really fast. Doesn't seem like it because the high school season keeps rolling along and we're still going. But let's bring in Justin and see if we have him here. Justin, are you here?
What's up, guys?
We're good, Justin.
Appreciate it.
I'm great, man. I'm looking at my bracket here and you guys talk. I'm like, man, I think I'm a genius because my bracket's still real healthy.
Wow, that's awesome.
One of my brackets is healthy. I did
one of them. You can only have one, man.
I did 10. I did 10 on ESPN. It was the one where I did the random pick. So I don't but it's on the 95 percentile. So I was like,
that's like dating 10 girls at once and saying eventually one will be my wife that I like.
Yeah, that's what you do it. I mean, in my early 20, when I was 21, 22, is that what you do?
I don't know if I had that kind of patience in my life.
Yeah. So, Justin, speaking of patience, like you said, you took some diligent time to look over the brackets and find out where these kids are from, which we're going to get into a little bit. But talk a little bit about your bracket. Yeah, where did you get it right? What did you hit on? Talk a little bit about your bracket.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it, and like you said, we'll get into it. To me, this year was always about who's got the guys that have the experience, right? And so I think what we start to see, Kentucky is a great example. Those guys are incredible players, incredible prospects, but man, they haven't been punched in the mouth a lot, right? Yeah, so you get a team like St. Peter's, man, they're just throwing haymakers. Okay, they're like, we live to box, right? So I think you start to look at teams like Providence, you look at a team like Miami, you look at some of these teams, right?
Yeah,
that have some dudes that have some toughness to them, that have some skin in the game, that have played 80 plus, 90 plus games in college. Man, I'm going to align myself with those guys a lot more than a guy that maybe hasn't his best moment up to this point may have been a state title game or a shoe championship game. Like, man, I want some dudes that have been on the road, that have gone through the toughness of the last couple of years. And I think we're starting to see that now with these teams, right, in the bracket. Yeah. These guys have some thick skin and some experience and some skin in the game.
Yeah, that's a great point. What we talked a little bit about before you got on, and you might have heard a little bit, is the officiating as huge a problem as it's been made out to be, or is there just, simply more eyeballs and people have quick reactions on social media?
I've always been an anti-ref guy, so I'm like, the refs are bad every single game, man. So I do have an issue, though, when the letter of the law supersedes the spirit of the law, and I think most coaches feel that same way. Where, I mean, I'm sure you guys probably talked about the Illinois incidents. Like, man, come on, dude. Have y'all not reffed your whole life to know that this is part of the game? Like, is it really that big of a deal? I also get annoyed with, I think I saw a coach say, on Twitter, who determines, what kind of shirt you can wear under your jersey? Just little dumb stuff. You're like, dude, just let the guys hoop, okay?
Yeah.
Literally, just let the guys go hoop. Let's stop getting so deep into the weeds with the rules. I'm if you haven't gathered, I'm very much a spirit of the law guy. So yeah, I never really like the officiating, no matter how good it is. So
do you think, because it was brought up, post games, refs getting interviewed? I mean, it was kind of brought up as an idea, the potential.
No, I think the refs should literally, I actually hate that we have broadcasts that explain why they made the call, because they're never going to throw their guy under the bus. Like, let's remove that element out of it altogether and let the game be about the 10 guys that are on the floor. Like, I'm so anti-ref everything. I don't want to hear from them. Like, the best kind of ref should be the kind that you don't even talk about.
Correct. It's kind of like an offensive lineman. If you never mention him, that means he's doing his job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I understand that angle. It's I think it's always been like that. I always tell people who know me and who talk to me about college basketball, like the 0-1 Duke Arizona game, championship game, was atrocious refereeing, and like ever since then, nothing surprising me. Was interesting to me. Everybody was going crazy about Arizona TCU, and I was like, did you guys just not see Baylor UNC the day before? What are you surprised about?
Right.
I didn't understand that. Oh my God, this is so horrible. That was a foul on the trap. It's like, guys, did you not watch the game 24 hours ago? So I'm kind of with you there, Justin. I don't want to overdwell on them.
Have you guys ever been to a travel team event where there's a ref clinic going on, where these guys that ref collegiately that are trying to level up? Like we host a couple of events where there's a couple of large ones, and I'm not trying to discount their job. Listen, I would never in a trillion years want to be a referee.
100%.
So like, much respect to you, because that is not the lane that I ever want to drive in ever. I'd rather go serve life in prison than put on stripes and put a whistle in my mouth. There's no way I'd ever want to touch that. That being said, like when you go to these clinics and you hear it, man, it is robotic and it is 100% non-human element. And they can say that it is. The way that they're taught and they're instructed, it is 100% robotic, and there takes out this human element. And like, if I'm a coach, I'd be like, dude, I'm just trying to talk to you. I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. And like the disrespect, at least that's my perception. And like the hand, it's like, dude, I'm just trying to have a conversation. And so for me, like, I don't want to hear about any of it. I just want to watch the guys that have worked their butts off their entire life go compete, because that's why we're there. And for me, that's how I'm always going to stay in that lane. Always. Sorry, refs. I got friends that are refs, but I'm sorry. I'm a player's guy.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I'm not as staunch on the refs about you, but I prefer them just do their job and let's not focus on
life in prison doesn't sound better than wearing stripes and putting a whistle in your mouth. Whatever, dude. Suit yourself, man.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Justin. And you make a point. Let's talk about what top 2 seeds are you surprised or not surprised got knocked off? Like which are any of the top 2 seeds that have already lost?
Kentucky. I mean, I mentioned them. Kentucky, ultra talented, but again, like, it's tough, man. That's a tough job. And I do have to wonder, is the magic and the allure of the Coach Cal era of Kentucky starting to kind of come back down to earth now, right? Like, and it's just so hard. It's so hard year in and year out. And like, the sustainability of elite is so hard to do when you go year to year to year. Okay. You can't constantly keep flipping houses, right? Your margins are eventually going to kind of come back down to earth a little bit. And so I'm not super surprised about that with Kentucky, them losing. Now, am I surprised they lost to St. Peter's? Sure. I think everybody is, right? But I'm not surprised that a team that was so young was so out of it right out of the gate. So that team didn't really surprise me all that much. Auburn, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I really like Auburn a lot. I mean, how can you not like Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler? But we knew that guard play would kind of catch up to them a little bit, and I think it did. So it's not surprising, but I think that's more of a credit to how good Miami is. I think Miami's incredibly talented. To me, they're one of the best offensive teams there is in the country. And I think that's more of a credit to how good Miami was as opposed to what Auburn didn't do. But I mean, that's just the nature of where the tournament is now. Like, if you aren't picking your bracket, like what we've seen over the last couple of years, and to think that Loyola Chicago can get to the Final Four or Oral Roberts can jack up your bracket, you're living in a world of 1950 basketball, because the game is so leveled out now that we shouldn't be shocked these types of teams are winning on a regular basis, because the gap, guys, to me is so small. It's so small.
Yeah,
100%. Speaking of Kentucky, it's interesting. They kind of took the route this year, obviously getting to the portal with like Kellen Grady, Xavier Wheeler, Oscar Sweebe, and taking older guys compared to normally when they take younger guys. And the result was a first round, upset. Where do you think Kentucky kind of goes next? Obviously, we're talking about the tournament, but what direction do they go? Young? Do they stay with the older guys, or?
That's a great question. I mean, like part of the research that I like to do every year at the tournament is how do rosters get created? I mean, everybody's got a different style, right? Like you can drive through any neighborhood in America and go, okay, there's all these different types of homes and everybody likes what they like. And so I think when you look at rosters, like look at Purdue, like primarily in state, I think they may have one transfer or no transfers. Like that's the way they like to do it. And like we always know that Matt Painter is going to have like a 7'9" guy in the middle every single year on his team, right? So like that's work for them. So for Kentucky, I mean, you know, this transfer notion is really interesting. Like Kellen Grady, tremendous in his level that he came from, right? Severe Wheeler, tremendous in the role that he came from at Georgia. Georgia's not Kentucky. That's no disrespect, but that's a different role that you're playing at a program like Georgia as opposed to Kentucky. The transfers to me are the stopgap player. And I think this is really going to be the most interesting. When we look back 20 years from now, we Band-Aid and we kind of scotch tape rosters together because guys couldn't go out and recruit high school players and couldn't really evaluate, couldn't really get to know players, right? Sure. So now when you put that together, well, and I don't know Severe Wheeler and Kellen Grady's relationship. I'm sure it's fine. But like, how does that mesh together where you've got two alpha males, right, in their 20s that have been around, that understand the game? How do they gel really well together? I don't know. I don't know the direction I would go. If I'm Kentucky, I'm like, yo, I'm Kentucky. I'm going to go out every single year and go pick up 4 or 5 Mercedes. I'm going to park them in the parking lot. I'm going to see what I can do, right? Like they were running with a lot of Honda Accords, and that's totally fine. Honda Accord's a great car. I drive one. But like they can't – that's Kentucky. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They got a different type of garage than most people, you know?
Yeah, no that's
doubt.
real.
No doubt. Justin, let's talk about coaching a little bit. Besides Shaheen Holloway, because we already talked about that and
sure.
what a job he's done. What coach do you think has done the best jobs in this tournament?
Ed Cooley, man.
Yeah.
Ed Cooley all day.
Yeah.
I'd play for that guy. I'd run through a wall for that guy. I would believe that guy. I think Providence, for me, I have in my Final Four. I really do. And so for me, like I believe in that team. I believe like Providence, they just consistently get better. They keep stacking up. And when I talked about earlier about sustainable success, like to me, Ed Cooley understands that. And he's been able to put that together with his roster. And they have a bunch of guys that fit their style. So like for me, like I think Ed Cooley has done a tremendous job. I think you got to put Juwan Howard from Michigan in that same place. Like they've won handedly 2 games in a row. And they beat some really good teams along the way. So I think Juwan Howard needs to get way more credit than probably he's getting to this point. Because to me, like, there's something to be said about everything they've gone through and the type of basketball they're playing against the type of teams they're playing right now. I think Juwan Howard needs way more credit for the type of coach that he's been and X's and O's guy that he is. And it's hard to argue again with Matt McMahon. Obviously, he parlayed what he's done at Murray State. Again, sustainable success and parlay that in LSU, which, by the way, I think he's about to build an absolute freaking monster in Baton Rouge because he takes that same style of play. But to me, those were the 3, like when I really scale it back. Obviously, Shaheen Holloway is sitting on the throne, but those 3 guys I think deserve a little bit more credit than maybe they're getting. Maybe they're getting a lot. I don't know, but at least for me, that's
Yeah, I really like Providence. They play so hard.
Oh my gosh,
they play so hard, and they don't have anybody that normally these teams they have a guy that's like going to be a lottery pick or a first round guy or something like that. They just got guys that just a compilation of guys that just play so hard and they mesh well together. And like you said, I have them. I actually predict them in the Elite 8. I can definitely see them in the Final Four and even potentially winning it. I mean, they just gel that well as a team. I mean,
to me, there's a little bit of a flavor. They don't mean to your point. They don't have a lot of star power, like say like Villanova, but Villanova was a super tight knit. They played together. Yeah. They were totally unselfish. There's a flavor very similar to me, the way that Providence plays for the type of success I think Jay Wright's been able to get out of his team at Nova over those last decade or so.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's move on to the players, Justin.
Sure.
We talk about coaching stock. Which 2 players you think have improved their NBA stock the most in the first 2 games? What have you seen? Which 2 players you like? I've seen a lot of guys that haven't improved nothing, but which 2 guys have?
That's it. That's the great separator, right? I think more guys go down than they go up.
Sure.
And maybe I'm biased because I live out here in Arizona now, but Ben Mathurin, dude. To me, I was thinking about that. I was really giving this a lot of thought this morning. Okay. I got up early. Like I love these types of questions. I wrote all these names and I kept scratching them off.
Yeah.
But Ben Mathurin reminds me, and I think people need to understand the context of what I say this to. He reminds me of pre-injury Vic Oladipo, like super high contract Vic Oladipo, freak athlete, big shot maker, confidence as big as the state of Texas, right? Like
Sure.
unbelievable player. And I know like that's like, oh wow, great pick, right? You picked the Pac-12 player of the year on the #1 team in the country. But to me, like when you look at improving their stock, that gap after Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren and like that group, Ben Mathurin, or do you take a guy like Jaden Hardy, right? Like, that's the type of stuff that you're looking at. I'm moving all of my stock into the Ben Mathurin zone, where he, to me, could argue that he could pick maybe even in the top 3. Again, think about Vic Oladipo before he got hurt. That dude, people were getting ready to pay that guy the bank, right? The bank. So he reminds me a lot of that same type of player, and he may be better than that. But to me, I think that's the #1 and #2 answer for me in this category, guys.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that with Ben Mathurin. I mean, like you said, a lot of guys went down that you saw that were projected, top 10 lottery, late lottery, first round that, you don't even know what the situation is. Like, Ty Washington didn't really have the best of showings. But I think Ben Mathurin really kind of separated himself as a guy that you didn't know was like a top 10 late lottery. I think he's starting to creep into that. Like I started to see people talk about maybe a potential top 5, top 6, 7 guy.
Yeah.
But
how can he not be? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And I think that narrative grows even further after this weekend too. I think it just stacks on top of each other. You know what? I did forget. I did have one more guy on my list, but again, he was like number 3 because Ben had #1 and 2. I think Tevin Brown at Murray State. Like if you're looking for a deep cut, there's always the guy that's drafted between 20 and 30 every year that sticks in the NBA. Historically, go look it up. I think Tevin Brown could be that, or a guy that's in the second round. There's always 3 or 4 players every year in the second round that stick. I think Tevin Brown out of Murray State could be that type of guy as well. Big guard, can really shoot it, sustain success at the collegiate level, well coached, never transferred. Like the core of the ingredients of guys that are professionals and the way they handle themselves and what they bring to the table and how you stay on the floor. I think Tevin Brown out of Murray State is also one of those players that if you're looking for a deep cut, if you're looking for a B side, Tevin Brown's your guy.
Yeah. No, those are great 2 picks. I do like Mathurin. I kind of mentioned that I tweeted it out and to see if anybody would say anything. It says, how many picks is Mathurin going to go too low? I already know because I was on the board with you, Justin. He's looking now in the the 4 to 6 range instead of 6 to 11. Like somebody's going to mess up and pass on him, but who's it going to be?
Yeah. I mean, given how many picks Oklahoma, let's just say it's going to be a Thunder because they've got like 7 of the lottery picks. So like,
right,
probably there no matter what,
Yeah, definitely. Justin, you did some homework. Players in the dance, where they're from. You put it out there on social media. You did some great research, and that's what you like to do with the tournament. You did some research on where high school players hail from all the teams. Just give us a high of what you found, anything that's surprising, and let people know what you did.
Well, yeah. So Texas, I mean, you're Ronnie, you're kind of cornered, right? So like you've got 2 Texans, like I grew up in Dallas. So you got 2 Texans that are, trapping you right now in the corner.
Sure.
Okay. And you're also a Cali guy. So between those 2 states, Texas had 87 players in the tournament. Okay. That by far leads in California. Now, no shocker, Texas and California are also the 2 biggest states. But when you start to really scale that down, Houston, I think, had 26 or 27 players in the tournament, which is a really amazing number. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the fact, like, who made the tournament, okay? So out of the top 5 states every year in and out, Georgia and Florida are also in there. There are only 2 teams from both of those states that made the entire tournament, Georgia State and Miami. That's amazing. Wow. So Florida had 30 players in the tournament. We're talking Florida. They produce now, granted, the prep schools and stuff kind of inflates that number. They're producing over 80 Division I players on an annual basis. They only have 30 players in the NCAA tournament. So that surprised me. What surprised me, and maybe I'm just biased in a way because I'm not a Midwest guy. I've never lived in the Midwest. I don't have, like, if there's an area in the country where I'm probably not as knowledgeable, it's always the Midwest. But between Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Iowa, like that corridor was a huge chunk of the NCAA tournament. And if you start to look at the bracket, you start to see all those teams that made it. The Big Ten was so strong. Creighton obviously was really strong. You start to look at the teams that made the tournament. And then you look at, where they go recruit and what the recruiting base is. That to me was the part that really stood out. Maybe I didn't give enough credit to. And those are guys that, by the data that I pulled through, those are the guys that actually stayed the longest and didn't transfer a lot. So I think there was some interesting value that you found with sustainability and guys that stay the course at where they're at. So to me, that was the big thing. But yeah, I mean, shout out to the city of Houston, man. Like they are deep in this tournament. I think 27 players, I think, from Houston, and then LA was right behind too. So again, two of the biggest cities in the country, not that big of a surprise. There was one that I actually wrote down. There were 8 players from the city of London, which to me was amazing. Like I never think of European players, and London never comes to mind. But there are 8 players from the city of London that are playing the NCAA tournament. Again, massive city, 10 million people, but I don't think London ever comes to any of our mind as a place that pumps out a bunch of high-level players. So
you talked about Purdue recruiting mainly in state. Is there any other teams that are still around that have like a lot more in-state guys, or is that just
good question. So obviously, like Houston was one of those teams that they primarily kept. Now that they may get them on the bounce back, but again, there's so much talent that's there. And if you've talked to their staff, they're like, why would we recruit outside of our state? Like we've got so many dudes. So like that's one of them. Georgia State was primarily another one. They again, a lot of bounce back guys coming back to Atlanta. Right. Those were the 2 outside of Purdue that I think recruited the most. Now, you'd be surprised too on like, I think it was UCLA actually, I think had 10 players from California. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but it was shockingly not as much as I thought it would be, especially for the high majors. I mean, they're going wherever. And again, I think it goes back to the way that everybody kind of scotch taped their roster back together. They were just trying to get dudes really, really late. You know, let me ask you guys a question. Who is the best transfer still playing in the tournament?
Is it more for Miami?
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, right.
Yeah. Like he transferred earlier from Oklahoma, but he transferred.
So when you start to think about the transfers, I was thinking about this, right? Like I started to look through it. Now there was over 1,000 players, or over 1,300 players. I think it was 280 were transfers. I started to think about like who really plays a huge role. Walker Kessler for Auburn, like a legit starter. But when I started to think about it, I was like, man, you're right. Charlie Moore was a guy that kind of was just like, he's just kind of like the free agent that gets signed in the playoffs in the NBA.
Correct.
Like, oh, he plays for them now? Damn, he's played for like 8 teams.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? That's just killing you.
Yeah, like you said, he has experience. You know, regardless of how talented he is individually, he has experience, and his strength was Auburn's weakness. So
that was it.
Yeah.
But my point was like with the transfers is like, are they good enough to change the dynamic of your team to put you into the second weekend?
Yeah.
And I would argue that no. All that it is, it's a stopgap on your roster. That's all that it is. And historically speaking, the big dogs are also not the guys that win the tournament. The Jay Wright model for what we've seen at Villanova, where you can still develop and cultivate pros, or Virginia like DeAndre Hunter, or all the guys that Jay Wright's had at Villanova. To me, that's the model where you have to find the right level guy, maybe the 60 to 7 or the 30 to 75 ranked player that you get in within your program, you cultivate, and you get him better through development, where he's not leaving after 1 year. That to me is the secret sauce of sustainable success and being competitive in college basketball. Because the one and done guys, they're not winning championships.
No, and to your point, you got to give some credit to Sean Miller, where whoever told him to bring in Christian Coloco,
no doubt,
the guy's playing like he's so good right now. I mean, look at his field goal percentage, and he hasn't taken a bad shot since probably January.
That's another one that stock is raised.
Yeah,
I totally agree. But you know what the secret sauce is to me? They have unbelievable developmental coaches on that roster.
Yeah.
Look at Gonzaga. I mean, like when Tommy Lloyd was there, they developed so many good players that just kept getting better. You have, to me, that, and like, I'll hang my career on that. You've got to find those players between that 35 and 75 range, cultivate and develop them and make them better. You have to.
Yeah. And that's what Tommy Lloyd is doing, like you said, with his staff, with TJ Benson and those guys. They've done a great job. I mean, I watch, Christian Coloco was in my neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Did I think he'd be playing like this for Arizona in a second weekend, going into the second weekend? No, but hey, they've done a great job, and he obviously has size and he obviously can move. So,
but that's the beauty of the tournament, right? Like, it's like when we were in college and you went into this small club and you saw this band, you're like, man, I think that band was pretty good. Like 5 years later, you can't get away from them. They're on the radio everywhere you go. Like, March Madness is that way. You're like, I cannot believe Coloco's that guy, right?
Yeah,
that's the beauty of it, man. Like you just the right time, right place, right situation. Only game on TV. The whole country's watching. East Coast is staying up late, paying for it the next morning because they had to watch this dude go to work in overtime.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Justin, we've talked about the 5th and 6th year guys. We talked about the Charlie Moores at Miami. So for recruiting for high school prospects, it may never be the same. I know you have a lot of experience in this. You've been around 20 years on the recruiting scene. What's next on the horizon for high school prospects? And will the transfer portal kind of remain as it is for the foreseeable future, or do you see some kind of breaking or something different happening?
Great question. I mean, I think about that all the time, right? Obviously, in the business that I'm in, I don't talk to college coaches as much as I used to, But again, I go back to this point.
Yeah.
Tell me a transfer that's made an impact for teams to get to the second weekend, right? Yeah. And I think NBA started to do this too, right? Like, oh my God, we got to find guys that hit corner threes. That's all the NBA is all about. We got to find guys that corner threes. Guess what? Steph Curry is a different animal, guys.
Right.
Okay. CJ McCollum ain't Steph Curry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Like we can come up with all these things. JJ Redick, unbelievable player. He ain't Steph Curry, bro. So like the analytics may tell you one thing, like it's going to work. No doubt about it. It works. But to me, I think when you start to look at it, go, okay, what is my competitive advantage? Yeah. Again, I think you go back to that style that we're seeing. Providence. Well, who did they play all the time? They played Villanova. They saw them on the recruiting trail. Oh, what are they doing? How did they go win 2 titles? Okay, I need to think about that. So I think there's going to come back down to earth. Again, remember, guys, we didn't have college coaches in a gym for over a year and a half to go out there and develop, right?
Correct.
And so I think part of it, so what did we all do? I listen, again, like you said, Ryan, we've been doing this for over 20 years. I've never watched more film in my life than I have over the last 3 years. Okay.
Sure.
And I still got literal VHSs out in my storage unit for games from like 2002, right? Like I've never watched more film.
I'm going to get them from you.
Dude, I've got some bangers in there, I think. It's like some absolute bangers. I could probably sell that like on the side. Some stuff.
Yeah,
but,
you need to start some NFTs. That's what you need.
I know. It'd be really grainy, man. It'd be really grainy. I'd be like the Banksy of the NFT basketball market,
That's funny.
But I think transfers do come back down to earth a little bit. Listen, the nature of the beast is I'm going to find something better somewhere else. Like, I don't think that's ever going to change. But I think the value of the type of transfer, I think when guys get back out there and they have a full recruiting season, that'll change. Okay. That'll change again. Like to me, it's all what's the most popular thing. Okay. And like, I think there's an interesting point too. So Duke's going to go through a transition. Kentucky, I mean, how long will Calipari's thing last, right? Kansas has pivoted a little bit on the way that they recruit now, right? UCLA is going to pivot the way they recruit. Like, I think when you take those blue bloods and how their process, it trickles down. But then you look at guys like look at the sustainable success of Murray State, right? The whole time Matt McMahon's been there, he's been a 25 win kind of guy. Like, how do I replicate that? So I think high school guys are going to be recruited more, but I think there's going to have to be a little bit more pointed research, I think, on the collegiate level. How valuable is that transfer? Okay. Just because you added a transfer, it's like, great, man. What is he going to do? You need a 9th guy in your rotation? No.
Yeah.
That
makes a lot of sense.
I think it levels back down a little bit. It's like the housing market,
Sure. Yeah, I think in like a year or two. I think 23 class still going to go through it some, but I think when 24s and 25s, I think
you're right. Why? Because it's loaded.
Right. Right.
There's some dudes. Yeah.
Right. And I think it'll get back to somewhat of reality. Obviously, the one-time transfer thing is going to always, it's not going to be completely the same, but I think we'll see more normalcy about that time.
Yeah. It's a weird period of time, right? We've got the transfers. We've got no recruiting. Now we've got the G League. We've got overtime. We've got guys playing overseas in a country that I got to Google to figure out where it is. Like, there's so many more options post high school or in high school that when you take that out of there, even taking 30 high level guys out of a top 100, I mean, that's like a quarter of the inbound talent that affects college basketball.
And Justin, I have this one question for you. I was thinking about it this morning. The live period, is always such a draw. People get ready for the live period. Do event operators kind of take it, because of the way recruiting is now, do event operators take a hit with the live period? Do as many coaches come in and watch, or do what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the first weekend of April is always the toughest weekend because a number of things. Who's playing with who? Okay. They all want to go find the best guys, right? So what happens? Every level goes and rushes to EYBL. I get it, man. EYBL is freaking loaded. Like I'm not trying to discredit that. You're still trying to figure out what you need. You're also still trying to figure out your current roster, right?
Yeah.
And so, and on top of that, like you've got a lot of regional events. To me, the first weekend is the hardest weekend to ever project because you never really know what's going to happen. Guys, I think go back to what they're used to. I think like, I go to that every year.
Right.
But now, I mean, if you look at the approved list of events that first weekend, bro, like it is like you just throw a dart on the map. Like, I guess I will go there. So many events. Like we've got one in Atlanta, and what it is a mid-major and lower, still available. Like it's a really sweet spot. Tevin Brown, I'm biased. That dude killed it. And I mean, I can't tell you how many guys in the SEC. I'm like, yo, this guy Tevin Brown's really good, and like he is. But a lot of guys get so enamored with that shoe stuff. And I think when you look at the transfers, a lot of those guys are guys that were like playing that shoe stuff. When guys that are playing independents, we all know this. We've all been to independent events. You're like, yo, that guy's freaking good, right? Yeah. Like look at Oral Roberts' roster last year, right? Like dudes that they're all independent all-stars, right? And killers. And we know 3D Empire. We see all these guys and like, to me, that was the best independent team in the country, from my opinion, what I saw. And I saw dudes that are going to wreck brackets for college. Like I know it because I saw it, what they did against high-level guys. And so I think it's the toughest weekend, the first live period of April. But I also think if you're really, really good at evaluating talent, you win games in March 2 years from now for what you do in 3 weeks.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Did you put that one in the back of your mind, like, Coach, you come back to your recruiting meeting on Monday, I found a freaking dude. Nobody say a word. Don't call JY. Don't call any of the .coms. Just hush. But we got a dude. We got a dude.
For sure. A lot of what's going to be determined in the tournament in the next couple of years is going to happen in the next month or so. For sure. You're right about that. So, Justin, as we let you go, just tell us the name of your event, where people can find out information about your event. Tell us your Twitter handle and your website so people can find information about where you're going in the library.
I appreciate that. Our big one this spring is going to be in Louisville. It's the Grassroots Showcase. It's the second live period. We're almost close to selling that out. We'll have over 500 teams. We're going to put down almost 50 courts under one roof. It is basketball Costco. We've got games at Freedom Hall, which is pretty awesome. Last year we were there. It was not live. I remember telling a kid, I'm standing in the middle of Freedom Hall, and I was like, this is like, I'm a junkie, right? Like I'm a junkie. Yeah. I told this kid who just happened to walk by, I go, hey man, you know where you're at? He's like, nah. I said, man, Muhammad Ali fought a fight right here. And he looked me in the eye. He goes, I'm sorry, who? And I was like, oh God, I'm so old. He didn't know who Muhammad Ali was. So it kind of melted my brain a little bit. But we'll be playing there. That's our big one. We've got the Atlanta Jam also going on, but our big one for sure is the Best of South in July, the first recruiting live period, downtown Atlanta at the World Congress Center. That is the one. If you're an independent team, you absolutely 1,000% have to be there. We had over 500 coaches there last year, and it's the place that you're going to want to be at. So, but hoopscene.com/events, that's where you can go find us. Listen, if you're an independent team, you got to find a place that you can go play and being competitive and like get a chance to put your guys in position that you can prove to these college coaches that you got some dudes that can absolutely wreck brackets because they're out there and they don't play for a brand. They 100% don't play for a brand. Those guys are really good, but that 60% of basketball is non-major basketball and they have to play somewhere. So
right, for sure.
Thank you. Appreciate the insight, Justin. We'll let you go. Thank you for your insight, the numbers and your great insight on the tournament as well.
No, I appreciate it, Justin.
Appreciate
it. Care. Bye. As you see there, Ani, Justin has the nice one-liners, and he makes some great points. You know? Like there's some bracket busters in these lower tiers, you know, and I never really thought about that too much, but he's right. How much transfers are like really kicking butt or the number one guy on a team?
Right. Like how much are they like real impact guys on, Sweet 16 teams right now? Yeah. And like there are a few, like I know more at Miami and more that's in U of H right now, but like it's it's just rare. It's not as common.
No doubt about it. Yeah, you know, we go back to the thing. Top seeds are struggling a little bit, but the best teams did survive. You know, which are probably Gonzaga, University of Arizona, and in Kansas. You know, I mean, so we mentioned that. I think we did a pretty good job. You know, the only team that surprised me that didn't play better, I thought, was Tennessee.
Yeah.
You know, they just didn't play very well, and you know, I thought their foot speed would make a difference, but Michigan played well. You know, was there anything else that surprised you there, like in terms of the teams that got knocked off, or any team other than that? I thought that the teams that advanced were fine. It wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, Baylor was a little bit surprising, but they've been up. They've been very kind of up and down this past month, especially not having LJ Cryer, and the Tennessee. But other than that, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
not surprised. Like Miami beating Auburn wasn't a shock. Like that was
I had that. I had Miami going through on that. Or at least I knew they'd cover. They were like an 8.5 point. I was like, oh, Miami's going to cover this.
Right.
I was like, Wong is too good. They can't stay in front of Wong. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
Isaiah Wong from Philly, a really good college player. It's very interesting. You know, it's down there in the East region is the winner of North Carolina, UCLA. You guys don't necessarily think they're going to get by Purdue. Sounds like you and Justin.
Man, just how UNC's playing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me. I think Purdue is going to be that first, Big Ten team in a while that can make it to the Final Four. They're playing pretty well. They can really get inside and out. But it wouldn't surprise me if we see UNC in the Final Four. They're really clicking at the right time.
Yeah, UNC's tough. They're good. They got size. They got some good player, Wendell Moore, and those guys that are really good. Let's talk a little bit about the Midwest, Kansas, Providence. Yeah, I know you guys like Providence. Justin talked about how much he liked Providence. Between Iowa State, Miami, one of those teams is going to the 8, and then it's just Kansas too strong. And like, hey, Kansas is the number 1 seed. They're going to pull through, or is Providence actually going to do it? And then we got a Cinderella 8 between a Providence, Iowa State, Miami.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be just a dogfight, that Providence Kansas game. See Kansas slightly edging them out, but it's going to be a brutal battle. I see Miami beating Iowa State, and then that Miami Kansas game, because Miami, their advantage they have is they do have the older guys that are experienced, and they're ready to go. That's going to be a dogfight. But I can see Kansas. I think Kansas comes out.
Gotcha.
Comes out of the Midwest on that.
Now let's talk a little bit about the West. Gonzaga's obviously favorite. That big matchup that Duke won earlier there, is that kind of the rematch people are looking for, or can Arkansas or Texas Tech spoil the party?
Texas Tech can definitely spoil the party. Either of them can. I think Duke loses.
Okay.
I actually think both of them lose. I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go there.
Arkansas and Texas Tech in the Elite 8.
Yeah,
wow.
That's what I'm gonna
take.
That
happens. That's gonna shock people. I think people are expecting, honestly, that Gonzaga will play Duke or maybe Texas Tech, maybe 60-40 Duke. But because they know those teams, they know the names. But Gonzaga to lose any time before the 8 would be a big shock. And then even to lose to Texas Tech or Duke would be a shock. So if that happens, we just called it, and we're going to come, we're going to come back to it. That's like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I like Note. I like how the guard play has been going for Arkansas. Devontae Davis, Jalen Williams has stepped up. I really like how Arkansas plays. Musselman got his boys rolling. Texas Tech, I mean, just how hard they defend, even though they got into a tough one the other day, but just the way they defend and get after it. Duke's still young, and I'm interested to see how those young guys kind of deal with the pressure of that Texas Tech defense.
Yeah. That defense has been playing very good. Do they have enough offense to get by Duke? That's going to be the question. Like you said, is Duke going to get hit in the – Duke's going to get hit in the mouth a bit, or are they going to respond?
Right.
They've had, and they're talented enough. Either team has their hands full against Gonzaga if Gonzaga advances. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Gonzaga's kind of winning to me and not even playing their best. I know Andrew Nembhard had a good second half against Memphis. That game was tough. were you surprised Memphis? I wasn't surprised Memphis game, a tough game. I mean, that was their season basically. They kind of salvaged their season a little bit, played pretty good. I think Drew Timme obviously was the difference. But what did you take of that? Did you think that Memphis, that's how they should have played the whole season, or do you think they kind of were like, hey, we're playing Gonzaga on a big stage, we need to step up? You know, they did a solid job. There's a few things that Penny could have done different, but overall they did a solid job.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not surprised that the game was close.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think we both predicted Gonzaga winning. In Memphis play like this consistently all season, then you don't see Gonzaga in the second round. You know, like that's how talented they were. Yeah. And I think, you know, what I did like that I saw from Memphis was there was a kind of a come together, even though there was questions about like the locker room and how that's really come along. But they kind of got together and like, hey, let's actually do this. And they gave Gonzaga a game. I mean, they were up by double digits at one point against them. So, you know, like not surprised, but if they played this way all season, then you're going to want to concede. You know?
Yeah, they wouldn't have to have played Gonzaga. They'd be probably in the Sweet 16. So that's everything counts. That's what I'm saying. Every game counts. All your games count, especially at the high school scene where we're talking about state champions, Invitational, GEICO. Every game counts in terms of your ranking. In a little bit in the NCAA tournament, I think the NCAA tournament takes into account your little more how you're playing than your overall season, but still all the games matter. Let's go to a team now in the region where the recent play has really made a difference, and especially with Houston, the 5 seed. They were like, I think 11 of 12 now. Houston's really playing well. We got the third ward guys versus this pretty glamour Arizona team that they love the camera. I mean, you can't get a better type of contrasting matchup to me in the 1-5 there. And then Michigan, Villanova. What do you see there?
Ooh, man. Arizona it's a tough matchup for Houston, especially with the size and the depth of size. Houston just gets after so much defensively. They're going to give Arizona different looks, and they're going to get after them. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how Arizona adjusts. And like, you know, I remember we've said it multiple times. You said it multiple times about how Arizona handling adversity. And they've handled adversity well against TCU, and I think they're kind of coming along. I think you're seeing an Arizona team growing up. I'm gonna go with Houston. I think some of the guys step up, like Fabian White, who's had a good solid season. Josh Carlston, Jamal Shedd's been playing really well. Kyler Edwards, Moore. I'm gonna go with Houston with the edge there. Maybe just bias on that, but we'll go give Houston the edge. But I think Arizona is a very tough matchup for Houston. I got Villanova versus beating Michigan. I just think Villanova got a solid depth of talent. They're like a tight system, and you know, I think this is where Michigan, you know, even though they've had a hell of a run, especially with Juwan Howard coming back, which we didn't think this. You know, who would have thought when we had our show like he would be coaching the Sweet 16 right now?
Not a good Tennessee, I didn't think, but they done a good job, and they have some personnel. You know, but again, we were kind of like the Big Ten's overrated, which they are, and we weren't wrong on that. But he's the one team that's doing well. They got some good players. You know, they definitely got some good players. I think you're right, Villanova. I think it's just too well schooled and well oiled. I do think the Arizona Houston winner advances to the Final Four, though.
For sure, 100%.
If Houston wins that game, they're going to roll to the Final Four again.
Yeah,
Calvin Sampson, can't say enough about him. Most people think he's doing as good of a job as anybody. Again, like you said, Justin mentioned all the good players from Houston and all the good players from Texas, and that's not surprising. You know, I followed Texas ball, even though I've never been in Texas in terms of living. I followed it my whole life because of the football and how big it was. And you know, the old joke was, you know, the spring football is the second best sport in Texas. And that, you know, that was a big thing always for a long time. And then the event operators stepped their game up. The cities were growing. Just the coaches getting down to watch players in Houston and Dallas and Fort Worth in the surrounding areas. We talked about Beaumont having good basketball over the years in other towns. I'm sure it's such a huge state. But Now, where do they go from here? Like a TCU, Texas Tech, there's so many good. Is there enough talent to sustain those teams to all be good for the next 5 years, Ani, or something had to break here? I mean, is there some, is Calvin Sampson going to move on to NC State or something like that? Or obviously that's not anything he's thinking about right now, but what do you foreshadow? Or can these teams sustain being very good?
Yeah, I mean, I think Calvin Sampson stays till he retires in Houston. Sure. I think you got a lot of talent, especially like the 25 class here. We just had a tournament. Buff ran a tournament, and Jim Hicks ran a tournament. You got a lot of talent in this 25 class, the 24 class as well. 23 class, not the depth isn't where I think that's a national thing too. I think next 5 years you can still recruit in state and be fine. Louisiana's actually starting to they have some talent there. You can kind of dip in Arkansas, even though it's tough. You got a top Arkansas kid, getting him be outbeating Arkansas is very tough. Oklahoma always has solid talent, but I think you can always, they're going to go portal, but you can recruit in state and be just fine the next 5 years and have success. And I think if you go out of state, you don't have to go too far, right?
Gotcha.
You can go Louisiana, you can go Arkansas, you can kind of find a diamond in the rough before you bank finds them. And you go Oklahoma, I think you can find some real diamond in the rough in those areas.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it's pretty exciting to see all the good Texas basketball in recent years. Just Texas has their work cut out from Chris Beard,
right?
Did a hell of a job at Texas Tech. He moved over, and Texas Tech's still rolling with their assistant has moved up, and he's kind of following that same path. So you got teams that have those two teams are in the Sweet 16. Then Arkansas. How about if Arkansas beats Gonzaga? Like you said, them top guys are not leaving.
They ain't leaving. they ain't leaving. Like you're not out being Arkansas. You're not out being Muss. And Muss is he's very active as a recruiter for as a head coach. It's just hard. It's gonna be hard for them to leave home.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just like to see the competitiveness amongst the teams and who they get. Like you said, they got some transfers. Obviously, Houston's done a great job, and that's going to be a tough game. I think the key to that game will be how the fouls are called. Coloco hasn't been in foul trouble. I know TCU's guy was a little bit in foul trouble. He had a hell of a game. But if the game's called real close and tight, or if they let them play, what did you think of that? My TCU and the Arizona thought is that they weren't going to call a foul with that guy. The great play was the trap. Now, what happened after that is open up for debate, but the guy was facing the other way. He was 47 feet from the basket. I just didn't think they were going to call a foul. But if it wasn't a foul, then that means it was a backcourt.
Right.
So I don't, whether it's a foul, I can live with it being a foul. But if it wasn't a foul, then it was a backcourt violation.
Yeah, I just think at the situation, like you said, getting trapped that high up, close to half court, do you call a foul and then send him to the free throw line and that's game? You don't want a game that now if he clearly just hacked the hell out of him, I mean, that's one thing, but situation like that, you gotta let it move on. You let
him move on. He was trapped. It was a good play. He tried to get out. He had nowhere to go, and he stepped on the line, but the refs didn't see it, or they weren't in the moment in position to call it. It didn't look like they were in position to call it.
Right.
And then. But TCU did a really good job, and that wasn't, as a 1-9 or whatnot. It was nobody suspected that Arizona was going to blow them out. So,
right.
They did a hell of a job. But yeah, if we could look at, let's say Gonzaga, or most likely Gonzaga. Let's just say Gonzaga. You got a Gonzaga playing either North Carolina or Purdue, and then you got Houston versus most likely Kansas. I mean, again, those might be a picks, but most likely, or Arizona versus Kansas. Those are big time games. But then again, it goes back to what me and you and Chelsea said last week. After all this mumbo jumbo, we're kind of getting back to the Blue Bloods again. The Blue Bloods are the ones that survive. So, what are the chances that a Miami or St. Pete wins 2 more games, or even Providence? 2 more games. That's a lot of wins.
That's a lot of wins.
2 huge wins.
Providence having Kansas. That's just tough. I don't see them winning 2 more. Miami, no. St. Peter's, no. Great story, but no. It, like you said, it's just, I mean, it comes back to the blue bloods. Like they're the ones that last. And like Justin talked about, I mean, those are programs that aren't really just hunting in the transfer portal like that either.
Yeah, they kind of just don't need to, it seems like.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great tournament. And we love the storylines. It's been a really cool to see, and I really like Justin's just his input in terms of like how he broke it down, like where the recruits are from and where they're getting it. I never really thought about the transfer portal like that. I know fill bodies, but are filling bodies better than developing? Maybe the college coaches don't feel they have time to develop like they used to. Sure. What do you think it is? Like, hey, we bring in a bunch of young freshmen. We're gonna have, if we have a bad season or two, we're gonna get fired. Right. What do you think it is that it's like, hey, I'm gonna go get a seasoned guy instead, even though he may not be huge impactful?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of a couple things, like situations. You know, didn't have a great season. Contracts not renewed. You know, and then you're in a situation where you know, maybe a stopgap is better because you have to win that season, the next season to even get it extended.
Contract extension.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's more so just like how the previous seasons have gone. What is your status? Like, let's say, can you afford to potentially have a rough season this year when you going through development? And I think that's just where some of these coaches are. But again, like, when you look at all of it, you're not going 11 or 12 deep. You're really going 7, 8.
Correct.
And so why can't you have a diet of high school kids and portal kids? I don't think there's a real issue with it, but I think it's more so just a little bit of panic. When you don't have a good season, and like if you have another bad season, that you're going to get fired. So then it's like the automatic is, I got to get a portal kid. I got to get an older kid. Like, these young guys are going to help me keep my job right now. But still, it's like when you have an older guy be your 10, 11, 12 man, let's say, they aren't going to be happy.
Happy, and they're not developing. You're not developing them.
Right. And that's going to trickle into what people don't realize, that could trickle into your 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You know what I mean? Like, just the whole culture, just the whole environment can take a hit. Yeah.
I would rather want a disgruntled young player than a disgruntled old player.
100%.
With bad habits or whatever the reason he was in the portal. Could be a million reasons. We don't obviously know the reason for each guy, 1,200 guys, but there's something that happened, or something that didn't happen for that kid. So very interesting. It's going to be an interesting upcoming Sweet 16 weekend. We'll keep following it, and we'll come back next weekend with our more in depth on the Final Four. We'll go over what we went over. We'll talk a little bit more about the high school season quickly wrapping up, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the live period things. What might where we might be, or what's a big event. There's so many, as Justin said. There's so many. So we appreciate Jordan Divens coming on, talk a little bit of high school, and Justin to talk a little bit about recruiting in the tournament. Sure. I think we're gonna wrap up here. Wanted to go over a couple things before we do. We talked about what we're gonna say next week. Well, we want to talk about our podcast network. Kicks of Your Life with Jordan McLaughlin of the Timberwolves is rolling and going. Noble and Roosh continue to have talented guests and good insight. We got Buckets and Breakdowns, Unapologetic, and a few others. So make sure to check those out. Ballislife.com, also on the Ballislife Podcast Network on YouTube. We appreciate you guys, going there and checking those out, checking ours out on YouTube and on Spotify and iTunes. I want to also talk about the women's drop. We're still getting that out there. Second installment of the women's line. It has good reviews. Shop.ballislife.com. Free shipping on all U.S. orders. It's a limited release, so go check that out, ladies, or do something. Maybe people should get some for their ladies. All the men buy some. Be nice and get some for your.
I'm gonna get some for mine.
So use that. Make sure you use that discount code, the In the Paint discount code PAINT15. That's again PAINT15 for the one-time discount code. But until then, until our next episode, me and Ani are logging off.